Hello, my name is Yasmena Al-Mulla. I'm a freelance journalist based in Kuwait, and today I'm going to be discussing what's been going on in the Kuwaiti parliament. So, to understand what's been going on, we need to revisit the events of December 5th, which was when the parliamentary elections took place. This was the first general elections to take place since 2013, other than the 2019 by-elections that took place to fill two vacant seats as two MPs were removed from parliament. So the elections were heavily anticipated. Voter turnout was around 60% despite the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing boycott movement. So the elections resulted in some interesting changes. Number one, the parliament is currently an all-male parliament. Out of the 29 women that ran for office, none won a seat. And it's important to note that this is the highest number of women to ever run for parliament since women were given the right to vote and run for office back in 2005. Another significant change was out of the 44 incumbents that were running for re-election, only 19 won seats in parliament again. And so there was a huge change in new faces and previous MPs that didn't run running again. Out of the 342 candidates that were running, 51 seats in parliament. This happens as Kuwait is divided into 5 electoral districts, and the top 10 candidates of each district win a place in parliament. So about 10 days after the general elections were concluded, Parliament held its opening session. This is regularly when the Speaker of Parliament is voted for, the Deputy Speaker, and what they call the Office of the Parliament, as well as when MPs that are in Parliament are voted into certain committees. So a lot of tension built up in the lead up to the opening session as 42 MPs publicly stated that they will be backing Badr al-Hamidi for Speaker of Parliament, who was running against the previous Speaker of Parliament, Marzouk al-Ghanem. During the session, what used to happen in the past is that the vote for Speaker is anonymously, and so no one knows who voted for who. Before the session happened, several MPs proposed a proposal that they do the vote publicly, and so they know who voted for who exactly. What ended up happening during the session was Marzouk al-Ghanem was re-elected as Speaker of Parliament after receiving 33 votes from the 64 members present. So a lot of tension built up after this session. Several legal professionals were consulted to understand whether Article 35 of the Parliament's procedure law, known in Arabic as Al-La'iha Al-Dakhiliya, can be overruled, as the Kuwaiti constitution, the highest mandate in the country, does not mention how the voting process should take place. So several of the opposition, a loosely coined term in Kuwaiti politics, were claiming that they should have done the vote anonymously, specifically since they sent in a proposal prior to the session. So the clash between the government and the opposition figure began since the opening session, as several have claimed that they re-elected Al-Ghanem as Speaker of the Parliament despite the overgrowing public opinion to change the Speaker of the Parliament. And so many have stated that by re-electing Al-Ghanem, the government has not been listening to the demands of the Kuwaiti public. So less than a month after the events of the opening session took place, 3 MPs filed a motion to interrogate the Prime Minister. So what this means is that the Prime Minister will be questioned by the MPs, and then if there are enough MPs that back the interrogation, then this will move forward and will be taken on a vote. So the MPs that filed the motion filed it on, based on a couple of clauses, one of which is claiming that the Prime Minister has breached Article 98 of the Kuwaiti Constitution, which basically says that the government needs to express what their plan is to the Parliament, or what the government plan is. So a day after this motion was filed, 38 MPs publicly stated that they backed the interrogation. So this is an unprecedented move, as this is the first time in Kuwaiti politics that the majority MPs favor a motion even before the session even occurs. So the interrogation session was scheduled for January 19, but was cancelled because the government resigned a day earlier on January 18. On January 18, the Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Nawaf Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah, accepted the resignation of the government. Since after the government's resignation was accepted, no parliamentary sessions could hold place until a newly appointed government was formed. This wasn't until March 3rd. But after March 3rd, no sessions happened because the parliament was suspended after the Emir suspended it on February 18 for a period of 1 month until March 18. And once the government was appointed, 2 motions to interrogate the Prime Minister were filed, signaling growing tensions between the legislative and executive branch. During that period as well, 2 weeks before the newly government was sworn into Parliament, MP Badr al-Dahom's membership was revoked on previous charges for insulting the Emir. This caused even more friction between the legislative and executive branch, as Al-Dahom is a staunch critic of the government and is one of the most prominent opposition figures. So once the suspension was lifted on Parliament and a new government was appointed, a swearing-in session was scheduled for March 30 so that the government can swear in Parliament and then move forward with the agenda at hand. The events of the swearing-in session took a turn since 27 MPs intentionally boycotted the session and sat outside the gates of the Parliament. The reasons was for various reasons, for discontent with the government and the lack of cooperation on various fronts. During the session, the Prime Minister, Sabah Al-Khalid Al-Sabah, submitted a request to postpone all motions to interrogate previous and future ones against him for a year and a half. The vote took place during the swearing-in session, and it was allegedly manipulated, which further invigorated the opposition. So it's important to note that this is the first time in Kuwait's history that the Prime Minister has been granted such a request. So the vote angered the opposition, many of whom called it unconstitutional and demanded that the Prime Minister be interrogated. During the swearing-in session, the Parliament officially revoked Al-Dahom's membership from Parliament and announced that a by-election would be taking place to fill his vacant seat. The by-election was held back in May in the 5th electoral district and resulted in a landslide victory for Dr. Ubaid Al-Wasmi, who is a lawyer and a former MP. So since the swearing-in session happened in March 30, there has not been a single regular session to move forward, as the opposition has made it clear that they will not be moving forward with any session until the Prime Minister is interrogated. Although several sessions were scheduled to move forward, the opposition disrupted it in some way or another to ensure that they don't move forward. Several times they sat in the minister's seat, which resulted in the government abstaining from attending the session, and therefore the session was adjourned. Although no regular sessions have been taking place, some special sessions were scheduled and have moved forward. It's important to note that the Prime Minister cannot be interrogated, or any interrogations can't happen at special sessions. So the special sessions that took place were to discuss issues like the recent events that were happening in Palestine, to discussing the fiscal budget for the upcoming year. So the opposition is adamant on not having any regular sessions move forward unless the Prime Minister is interrogated. This is because of several reasons. Number one is that they claim that the vote that took place that approved the Prime Minister's request was manipulated. This also has been attached to growing calls to remove the Speaker of Parliament, Marzouk Al-Ghanib, who they claim was the one that allowed for the manipulation to move forward. Secondly, the opposition is eager to get the Prime Minister interrogated to ensure that this precedent is not set where the Prime Minister is granted immunity for a year and a half. In addition, there has been significant public support for the interrogation of the Prime Minister. So according to a poll done by Majlisna app, around 60% of their users have indicated that they agree or they are for the interrogating of the Prime Minister. So the ongoing tension between the government and the opposition has created a political deadlock in Kuwait. What this means is that no legislation could be voted on or discussed since there have been no regular sessions taking place. This has resulted in many draft laws and draft proposals not being discussed. One of which is the electoral law. This has been deemed as one of the most crucial laws for the Kuwaiti public, as many MPs ran on the platform of vowing to change this law. So the electoral law has been an important discussion in Kuwaiti politics since 2012. So in 2012, the late Emir, Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah, issued an Amiri decree changing the electoral law from 4 votes per person to 1 vote. This has resulted in a large boycott movement, and since then, many people have been calling on changing the electoral law. Several proposals have been put forward by the current MPs, but have yet to be discussed until a regular session is held. So another proposal that has been submitted is to amend the Press and Publication Law of year 2006. The amendments call for greater freedom of speech, democracy, and freedom of expression. So this law has been the center of debate as several journalists and activists, including general citizens, have been charged on this law for speaking their mind on social media. The current proposal has been voted on in the first deliberation during the swearing-in session on March 30, but has yet to be voted on the second deliberation since there are no regular sessions taking place. The Speaker of Parliament, Marzouk Al-Ghanib, announced that they will be holding a special session on Thursday to discuss a variety of issues. This is likely to be the last session of the term. So it will be important to see what happens at this session and what will happen once Parliament reconvenes for the second term. Will the political deadlock remain? Will there be some cooperation between the government and the opposition? Only time can tell, so it will be important to see what happens at Thursday's session and what's likely to happen in the months to come. Thank you, and hope you enjoyed this talk.